How's it going? It's good to see you on our live tonight. I'm talking to you from Armenia. I'm in Yerevan, the capital of Armenia. We've been out all day traveling around the country doing reconnaissance for upcoming tours and we had a great time. If you want to see some of the most incredible scenery that we saw today, just go over to chuckholton.com and I'm posting some pictures over there of some of the stuff that we saw today. It would blow your mind, absolutely blow your mind. You can that'll take you to the locals page. You can sign up and subscribe there for free and get all kinds of information about all the reporting that I'm doing, whether it's on TV, articles I'm writing, books I'm writing, some of my documentaries, that sort of thing. All of that information gets aggregated over at my locals page, chuckholton.com. So you can go check that out. But I highly recommend it today, especially because I'm putting up some of the pictures that we shot today. Absolutely mind-blowing scenery here in northern Armenia. Now, we've got a tour starting full of some of you guys that is starting on Friday. And we've got some people actually coming in tonight that are members of the tour. And so you're going to get a chance to hear from some of them of what it's like to travel with Chuck Holton. And we'll see if they'd be willing to come back and do it a second time after this tour is over. We're going to spend a great 2-week whirlwind, well, 10 days whirlwind tour of Armenia, and it's going to be amazing. Somebody says my mic is cutting out. You guys got a good audio or not? Is the audio decent or not? If not, I can swap out the microphone. Is it crackly?
A little bit, maybe.
Okay, well, I will try a different microphone and we'll see if it's any better. This one might be better. Sometimes this little one will start to, Paul Bradley's on. Paul is a good friend. Paul, are you still in Ukraine or not? Paul was over in Ukraine doing some work. He's a a fellow Free Burma Ranger. So let's see if we can fix this microphone. Hang on a sec. Testing 1 2. Confirm. Testing 1 2. Okay, that might be better. I'll just have to put this bigger one on. Anyway, thank you for being on with us. I am talking tonight about the protests that are taking place around the country, across the United States. Just incredible. Just dozens and dozens of protests going on at universities and colleges all across the country and even across the world. And I really didn't want to talk about these because I kind of feel like, thank you, William. I kind of feel like it's like when your kid is misbehaving. You know, you don't want to give them, if they're seeking attention, you don't want to give them attention for doing bad things, because then you encourage them to do more bad things. So I just sort of wanted to ignore the ridiculousness, but it just keeps getting worse and worse. And what I want to talk about tonight is not so much the useful idiots that are shutting down campuses, these snowflakes, spoiled brats, like you say, Miami for life, that are breaking into historic buildings and liberating them, whatever that means. So, I just feel like what we need to do is talk about who's behind all of this, and not the kids that are being used as puppets here, because there is a very is my audio okay, babe? Oh, she doesn't know. She's not answering me. Oh, internet's bad, she said. Okay, so let's see if I can turn that up a little bit. Oh, how about, there we go. We'll turn that up a little bit. And how's that? Is that better audio? A little bit louder audio. People always complain about the audio, but these microphones are meant to sort of tamp it down so that you don't get a lot of background noise. And you're supposed to just turn it up on your end, but I turned it up over here, so that ought to make it better. Okay, so again, what I want to talk about is who is behind these protests, because they are obviously being orchestrated. These are not organic, is what I'm saying. These are not just, popping up because there's a bunch of students who care so much about current events. They don't. Okay, these students are really look. I was a college student once a long time ago, and I was very idealistic, and I got wrapped around the axle about things that I couldn't control, and I tried to raise awareness for things that I thought were important, like the national debt and things like that. But what I didn't do is go vandalize historic buildings. What I didn't do is go stand in the middle of the street or try to shut down an airport or try to shut down a bridge or a freeway or something like that, and engage in what I would consider to be terrorism. And the reason I consider it to be terrorism is, you ask yourself, what is terrorism? What is the definition of terrorism? Terrorism doesn't have to include violence. Terrorism is making people afraid to go about their daily lives in the manner that they currently are. Do you understand what I'm saying? People who engage in terrorism, the point of terrorism is not necessarily to kill a bunch of people. Killing people is a means to an end. When a terrorist blows up a school bus, it's not because he's angry at the children in that school bus. It's not because he thinks that the children in that school bus necessarily did anything wrong. What the terrorist that blows up the school bus wants to do is he wants to raise awareness for whatever it is that he is angry about. And so he blows up a school bus because that's a horrific thing. It's going to get news, it's going to get attention, and it's exactly like the spoiled toddler who's throwing a tantrum in the middle of the grocery store. That toddler is throwing a tantrum in the middle of the grocery store because he wants attention. And he's engaging in negative behavior to get that attention. Terrorism is a grown-up, brutal version of that toddler on the floor in the grocery store. And whether or not it includes violence is irrelevant, because if you're shutting down a freeway, if you're shutting down a bridge, if you're shutting down an airport, you are costing literally millions of man hours to be wasted. You are costing people literally millions of dollars out of their livelihood, hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars out of their livelihood. If you are vandalizing a building, if you're trashing a Jewish synagogue, what you're doing is you are costing people their lives, or at least portions of their lives that have to be spent in trying to fix what you just broke. And you're doing it to try to get attention. Okay? Jane, I think there might be a slider on that donation amount where you can slide it one way or the other to choose how much you want to give. If you're interested in donating and you don't want to have YouTube get a third of it, you can go to the link tree that Connie can post here on the chat. You can go to linktr.ee/Holton. Connie can post that. And there are other ways to give, Venmo and PayPal and things like that. We appreciate all your support. It helps to keep us doing what we do here all over the world. And the reason that I only spend about a month of my life every year in my own bed is because I'm trying to bring you the ground truth from the places where things are happening. Now, these protesters are going out and they're engaging in criminal behavior, and they are being not penalized, not punished. They are being rewarded and facilitated in doing so. And in some cases, they're literally being paid to doing so, to do so, to commit crimes. And this has been going on for a long, long time. I've done a lot of reporting on this. Somebody earlier put up Soros. Yes, Soros definitely has a lot to do with it. Okay, so George Soros, and now his son has taken over for him, but George Soros is now in his late 90s. And he's a billionaire, made his money short selling stock. Okay, so what if you don't know about short selling stock? What George Soros made his billions doing was making bets that bad things would happen, and there's a lot of thought that he was figuring out ways to make his bets a self-fulfilling prophecy. So he would bet on the stock market in Hungary, and then he would pay off a bunch of agents provocateurs to go to Hungary and start unrest and foment unrest and get people riled up and start protests and riots and blood running in the streets. And when that happened, obviously that's going to affect the stock market in Hungary and make the stocks go down, and Soros would make money on that. And that is how he made his billions. He is from a Jewish background, but during World War II he admits in interviews that he helped the Nazis by turning in other Jews. So this is not a good person. And his son apparently seems to be cut from the same cloth. Now, Soros has invested his billions in trying to remake the world order into a essentially communist system. And he does that by doing exactly what he learned to do in the financial business by these agents provocateurs. And so he invests in foundations that invest in other foundations that invest in other foundations, and they make a very long and windy paper trail, so it's very hard to trace the money. But I can tell you from having researched this very closely, I've met George Soros personally. I have listened to him speak, and I have tracked down the funding sources of many of the organizations. Some of them are NGOs, some of them are humanitarian aid organizations, some of them are community development organizations, and some of them are just plain, foundations and stuff. But some of them are political action committees. They all are working together, and they are funding all kinds of stuff that is bad for America. So, for example, a lot of the migrants who are coming to the United States illegally across the southern border, making their way up from Ecuador, Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, up through Panama and all the way up to Mexico, that costs money. That costs thousands of dollars. Well, as it turns out, that at least some of the money that they're spending to get to the United States has been donated by George Soros. Some of it also has been donated by the United States through the Organization for Immigration and Migration. But I've proven it through the Open Societies Foundation and other pro-migrant organizations that they all receive funding from the Soros family. Now, so they're funding illegal migration. They are putting money into LGBTQ issues. They are putting money into anti-gun or anti-Second Amendment issues. This is trying to legislate away the Second Amendment. So like moms, Moms Against Guns or whatever it is. This is partially funded by the Soros Foundation, by Open Societies Foundation, by the Tides Foundation. They have all these different organizations that filter that money down to these left-wing causes that George Soros feels strongly about. Now, he has every right to fund those organizations as the law stands right now, even though, and George Soros is a naturalized U.S. citizen. He wasn't born in the United States. But should it be legal for someone to intentionally fund organizations who are participating in the downfall of America? That's something for our Congress critters to take up, and something that maybe you ought to talk to your congressperson about. But the reason that it's hard to hold him accountable, Mary, personally, is because, as I said, they filter this money through so many different layers that it becomes very hard to track. But I have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt from their own documents where they have revealed where they get their funding, and you start to backtrack the different organizations, and like, oh, this pro-migrant group gets money from the Tides Foundation, which gets money from Open Society Foundation, which is funded by the Soros family. Tisra Pinto, yes, it is called dark money, and there's a lot of it floating around out there. I years ago did a report, or a series of reports in West Virginia about these protesters, these climate protesters, who are going out and spiking trees. So they pound railroad spikes into trees, so that when the lumberjacks come through to cut the tree down, it causes the chainsaws to bounce back and actually injure or kill the lumberjacks. It is very, very dangerous practice. They're the people that are going out and chaining themselves to bulldozers, chaining themselves to trees, climbing up in trees and doing sit-ins in these trees. These people are not organically just deciding to do this. I've proved by infiltrating one of these very extreme, actually violent climate change organizations. I actually infiltrated one of them and got them to think that I just told them I was a journalist, and they just sort of assumed that I was, since I said I was a journalist, I was a left-winger. And I got in there and got to know them, got to be friends with them, and they admitted that they literally get funding from sources like George Soros and other sources like the Sierra Fund. The Sierra Club is ostensibly an outdoorsman's organization. People who like to go hiking join the Sierra Club. That sounds great. Well, the Sierra Club didn't want to get its hands dirty by being involved directly in murdering loggers or in paying people to engage in illegal behavior. And so they gave money through a series of other organizations to these like Earth First and things like that. And Earth First was getting their bail money paid for every time they got arrested for breaking into a strip mine in West Virginia, or chaining themselves to a bulldozer or a tree or something like that. Because essentially all they could be charged with is trespassing, and that's like a parking ticket. So they get charged with trespassing, they pay their $210, which is funded by the Sierra Club or by the Soros organization, and then they go right back and do it again. That is how these left-wing protesters are being paid to break the law. They are not doing this out of the passions of their heart necessarily. As a matter of fact, I spent one entire year when I worked for the National Rifle Association infiltrating or attending every protest in America. So it was during the Black Lives Matter. It was during the a million students march against guns after some mass shooting or something. And so they were, I started going to all these different protests around the country. And for an entire, actually it was more than a year, it was closer to 2 years, I just traveled around and went to these protests and tried to interview protesters. And I learned a lot about these protests, about how they get organized. First of all, you notice that many of the signs that these people carry are exactly the same, and they're professionally printed signs. They're not scrawled on a piece of cardboard or something. They're professionally printed signs. And that's one clue that this protest was actually paid for by a much larger organization. Now, it's one thing to say, well, free speech. We can go out there and we can march and we can say that we're mad about climate change or we're mad about Gaza or we're mad about whatever. But there are legal limits to how much money can be given to a certain political candidate, a political party, by one individual. But when that one individual decides instead to spend his money through using those dark money means to pay for large groups of people to be whipped into a frenzy and to go riot someplace or to go shut down a freeway or a bridge or an airport, this is a much more effective way for them to spend their money in order to get results that they want, which is actually changing the political landscape. Okay, I mean, they could invest $3,000 in a political candidate, and that's probably not going to do a whole lot of good. And they do that, and they do find ways to cheat at that as well by having all their employees give their $3,000. You'll find companies in Silicon Valley where virtually every person that works for that company gives the maximum amount to a certain candidate. And as it turns out, a lot of that money just gets given to them by the guy at the top who wants to give more than his legal limit to that candidate. So they do cheat that way too. But they are finding out that by paying for these agents provocateurs, paying people to go protest, they can actually move the needle a lot more because the media will help them out. See, many of you probably don't know this story about the 1980s, so in the 70s and 80s. You might remember, if you're as old as I am, that there was a huge problem with hijackings, with airplanes being hijacked. And what would happen is people would smuggle weapons onto an airplane, and these terrorists would then take over the airplane as it was in the air, force it to land someplace, and then hold the people on the airplane hostage until they got their wishes. Usually it was for some prisoners to be released, or it was, a lot of it was Palestinian Liberation Organization. It had a lot to do with Palestinian stuff, and there were other terrorist organizations that did this too. And it was very effective for the terrorists because with 3 people, they could garner world headlines for a matter of days or even a week or more by holding an airplane hostage on a tarmac somewhere and threatening to kill or actually killing the hostage. This is before 9/11, when they changed the game and actually used the planes themselves as the weapon. As you know, that was another level without a doubt. But the way they used to do it back in the day was they would just hijack the plane, hold it hostage until they got their needs met, and then they would either, get released, or they'd get arrested, or maybe get shot if the military tried to retake the plane or something like that. And it was a huge deal for a long time. But then it stopped. It just stopped being a thing. And many people wondered, like, why exactly did all of a sudden the airplane hijacking stop being a thing? This is well before 9/11. Okay, this is back in the 90s. And as it turns out, there's a book about this that I read years ago by a guy who made a living as a consultant for airlines and countries when their planes got hijacked, of how to resolve the hijackings. And what he finally realized was, look, you can institute more security at the airport. You can have better negotiators talk to the terrorists. You can try to increase the training of the special forces who might have to go and and attack the plane and try to retake the plane. But really, all you have to do to stop this problem is to stop giving them airtime. Just stop reporting on the hijackings, because that's the reason that people are doing it. And so what they did is they went and talked to, at that time, the heads of the 3 major television networks in America, because this is before the internet, and news was essentially limited to there are only 3 networks. This is back in the 1980s, I guess. And so the heads of the 3 major networks got together, and with a little bit of pressure from some politicians and presidents and things like that, they agreed to stop reporting in real time on hijackings that took place. And almost overnight, the hijackings ceased, because when they put out the word that we're not going to report on hijackings anymore, we realize that we're actually encouraging copycat criminals here. And so we're just going to ignore them from now on. And almost overnight, the hijackings just stopped until 9/11. And then again, they took hijacking to a whole different level and used a different method. Okay, no, this is before CNN. There was CBS, ABC, and NBC, and that was it back then. And actually, CNN started during the Gulf War in like 1990. Was that 1990? During the first Gulf War was when CNN really took off as the world's first 24-hour news network. Okay, yeah, you're too young, one tired mama. You're just a pup. But it solved the problem. They stopped reporting on it, and it just went away because the terrorists couldn't get what they wanted anymore. They couldn't get the attention that they were seeking by this bad behavior. And so it worked just like it works on a toddler. When you stop giving them the attention that they're looking for, they find out, they realize that, hey, throwing a tantrum on the floor really doesn't work very well. The only thing it worked, if I ever tried it when I was a little boy, would have been a very, very sore backside. But a lot of people don't believe in that kind of thing anymore. But what I'm saying is that for these jokers and clowns on U.S. campuses around the country, it would be great if we could just turn off the media and just say we're not going to report on this anymore. If it were the same with the mass shootings around the United States, a lot of these kids that are performing mass shootings are just looking for attention. They are being spurred to this. I'll do a whole podcast if you like on the mass shooting epidemic and its links to the incel movement. I've done a lot of studying, a lot of reporting on that, and suffice it to say that if we were able to just turn off the reporting about the mass shootings, they would just go away. They would basically stop happening because they wouldn't work anymore. They wouldn't be able to get what they want out of them. And the same with these ridiculous protests on college campuses. There have been protests on college campuses since we had college campuses. Fine, let them protest. But they are being amplified by the media. The problem is we can't turn it off. These days, I'm a journalist. I mean, I've got my own network here with the Hot Zone, right? And so all it takes is one guy like me, and they're able to get their message out. And so we're not going to be able to put a stop to these protests the way that they did the hijackings back in the 1980s. Now, what is the beginning of these protests? Like I said, I went and attended protests all across America for a couple of years. This is just 6 or 7 years ago when I worked for the National Rifle Association. And what I found is that all of these groups are tied together. So whether it is pro-abortion groups, pro-LGBTQ groups, anti-gun groups, anti-Israel groups, environmental justice groups, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't matter. They're all the same people. They're all tied together. I started noticing when I would follow these guys around that I would see not just the same, organizations like, Queers for Palestine. You go to a anti-gun, uh, protest after a mass shooting or something, and there would be the Queers for Palestine people marching, or whatever, and you just go like, what does that have to do with the mass shooting that took place in Florida or something? I don't get that. You get environmental justice people that are protesting whenever. I mean, at the like pro-abortion rallies. Well, what does environmental justice and pro-abortion have to do with one another? There is a link, by the way, but I'm an American laster. What are you talking about, man? I fought and bled for America. How could you call me an America laster? Maybe you're talking to somebody else in there. Okay. All right. So what I mean is that it wasn't just the same organizations that I was seeing in all these protests. It was the same people. I would recognize the same vehicles because, these left-wing, hippies, they like to decorate their vehicles up and tie-dye their vehicle or put stickers all over them and stuff. You've seen those things that, all we need for world peace is whatever, that kind of thing, coexist and all that. So they got and I would start to recognize that's the same vehicle that I saw that was, at the protest march out in Portland, Oregon. Now it's in Washington, D.C. And then 3 weeks later, I'd see it at a protest in Dallas. And it's all the same people. And come to find out, so many of these people are actually on the payroll. They are the professional protester class. They are agents provocateurs. If you don't know what that word means, that just means people who they go someplace with the intent of whipping a crowd up into a frenzy so that crowd will do their bidding. Okay? So Venezuela is very, very famous for this. Venezuela sends agents provocateurs all over the globe practically. And I've seen them in Nicaragua. I've seen them in Panama. I've seen them in the United States. Poop stirrers, right? They send their people in. There's a protest going on about, let's say, a Black Lives Matter protest or whatever, and they send an agent provocateur in there to try to morph that peaceful protest into a violent protest. Okay. There were, without a doubt, agents provocateurs that were present on January 6th in Washington, D.C. at the National Mall who were intentionally whipping the crowd into a frenzy, trying to get them to attack the Capitol building. That is a proven fact. Okay. And so are there agents provocateurs in these protests that we're seeing now? Absolutely. No question whatsoever. Okay. So let's talk about one of them. There's a group called the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights. Okay. Now, there's a whole bunch of groups like this, but this is just one particular one of them. I ran out of time. I mean, I was trying to list some of these things. Oh my gosh, there's so many. They're just about every campus across the whole United States has got groups like this. Okay. And these guys get their funding when you start to trace the funding from Soros related organizations, from Qatar related organizations, from China related organizations. There's Confucius Institutes on almost every college campus in America. These are proven facts. They are there. They are giving billions of dollars to these universities, and they're doing it specifically to shift the narrative. They're doing it specifically to affect the political landscape in America and change our politicians. So if you think that you going to the ballot box and casting your ballot really is making that much of a difference, it's hard not to get jaded when you start to dig into this stuff and see what's actually happening. So let's talk about this. That U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights has a bunch of what they call fellows, and these fellows get scholarships from this organization. Well, the scholarships amount to almost $8,000 cash every month. It's like $7,400, $7,600 a month that they get in their pay from this organization. And big surprise, this organization or these fellows happen to be present, and not just present, but organizing and facilitating the protests that are happening, the anti-Israel protests happening all across America at universities across the United States. Okay, so they're being paid about $100,000 a year, each of these people, to make these protests happen. And they are the ones who go out and print the signs and put up the flyers and organize the kids and get the useful idiots together and get the useful idiots all, jacked up and angry, and teach them the chants. They're literally teaching them to chant things like "Death to America" in Arabic, right? And don't teach them exactly what an intifada is, but get them to chant intifada, which basically is try to kill Israelis. And there are a bunch of groups like this. So now that leads into the BDS movement. BDS, you've probably heard of the boycott, divest, and sanction movement that has taken hold, especially on university campuses all across America, but not just on university campuses. It's taken hold in companies and state governments, municipalities, things like that, where these organizations are pushing all of those things I just mentioned to boycott Israel, divest from any companies that support Israel or are owned by Israelis, and sanction Israelis in any way possible. So keep Israelis from being able to do business, prosper, and live their lives wherever they can and however they can. And this is a movement that's been going on for a long time. Now, it's a movement that hasn't really moved the needle a whole lot with politicians. The politicians sort of realize that these guys are they're a front, okay? They're a facade for dark money, and some of them take money from them. There's a lot of Democrats who are all in on the BDS movement. But if you need something to compare it to help you understand it better, BDS is what is to Israel, okay, what Black Lives Matter is to anything that isn't black. Okay, and what I'm saying is the Black Lives Matter movement is not about lifting up black lives and making sure that people value black lives, because if they were, they would be going out and protesting all of the black on black crime, which represents about 75% of all of the crime against blacks in America. You heard me right. About 75% of all of the violent crime experienced by black people in America is fomented on them by other black people. But Black Lives Matter never talks about that. The only thing they ever talk about is when a policeman or woman happens to shoot a black person a black criminal. I've yet to see where a black person was shot who was not in the commission of a crime or having just committed a crime. Like the Michael Brown thing with the hands up, don't shoot. That's an absolute farce. That didn't happen. He did not have his hands up saying don't shoot. He was actively trying to take the gun away from the policeman who shot him when he was shot. And he had just before then robbed a liquor store, and that's the reason why the cop approached him in the first place. But that led to the formation of a Black Lives Matter movement, and the Black Lives Matter movement has garnered literally billions of dollars from corporations trying to bolster their social justice bona fides, for their customers. And what have they done with that money? Have they invested it to actually, improve the lives of people in inner city America? No, they haven't done that. They have spent billions of dollars on advertising, on raising more money. They do this is very common for a lot of charities too, that, you give money to charities and most of the money actually goes toward advertising to raise more money for the charity, which doesn't really help the people they're trying to help. They've apparently tens of millions of dollars on luxury vacations and mansions, large homes all over the country for the leadership of Black Lives Matter, things like that. But BLM is a front for many of these same organizations. So when I went to a pro-abortion rally, or I went to a Students Against Guns rally, or I went to an LGBTQ rally, there would be the same Black Lives Matter people at that rally, and they're marching with us. So again, this is a funnel for left-wing money to try to get media cycles, to try to consume media attention, and therefore get their message in front of the American people. Okay? Somebody's saying, why was Qatar allowed to fund universities in the United States and Europe? Well, because it isn't illegal for universities to receive donations from outside the United States. Maybe it should be. Maybe it should be illegal. That could very well be a thing. But currently, it's not illegal. And there are lots and lots and lots of universities that are taking money from foreign powers and organizations. As a matter of fact, we went to my son-in-law's graduation from the University of West Virginia in Morgantown, and I was amazed at all of these really, really, really expensive cars. And we're talking about like Lamborghinis and stuff that were driving around there on campus. And I'm like, what's up with that? And they said, oh, well, this campus is a big campus for petroleum engineering because it's a big engineering school. And there are tons of Saudis from Saudi Arabia who send their kids to West Virginia University to get petroleum engineering degrees. And, of course, these are very, very wealthy families. They give lots of money to the university. And while their kids are there at the university, yeah, of course, my 19-year-old son who's in an undergraduate at West Virginia University definitely needs a Lamborghini. I mean, of course, no big deal. If they come from Kuwait, for example, did you know that Kuwait gives more than $80,000 to every single citizen every year, just out of their oil revenues? And so Kuwaitis, I mean, if you I have 5 kids, so 7 of us, I'd get $560,000 a year if I was Kuwaiti from the Kuwaiti government, and on top of that, free education, free healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. And so they have tons of money, and they send a lot of that money to schools in the United States. And so it makes you wonder, why are the schools so expensive then? Well, that's a whole nother podcast. But anyway, let's get into more of this Black Lives Matter, or this Black Lives Matter for Gaza, which is the boycott, divest, and sanction movement. This BDS movement has been going for years, and the people involved in the BDS movement have become the organizers and facilitators of the protests that we're seeing across the United States right now. Now, I want to point out something, because so yesterday last night, and I guess maybe again tonight, at Columbia University. You might have been watching the news and you saw that there were hundreds and hundreds of protesters camped out in Columbia University in New York City, and they had taken over one of the historic buildings and liberated it and were defacing it, and they defaced George Washington and um, the statues, and put a keffiyeh around his head and stuff like that. Um, and so there were more than 100 protesters that were arrested when they finally called the cops on these people and brought them in and started arresting them, rounding them up, throwing away their tents and things like that. Um, but so that's good. That's a step in the right direction, because terrorism should be treated as such. Why is that terrorism? Well, again, go back to the definition of terrorism. If you're punishing people that have nothing to do with the thing that you're upset about, then you're a terrorist. And it doesn't matter if you're using violence or not. So what these protesters are doing, these useful idiots are doing, is they're making it impossible for Jewish kids to go to class. They're making it for almost anybody to go to class. These are people paying $75,000 a year for their college education, and now all of it has to be online because they can't go to school. It's too dangerous for them to go to school anymore. They're shutting down airports, shutting down freeways. They're costing hundreds of millions of dollars and literally millions of man hours. And so they're punishing people who are not the IDF. They're upset with the Israeli government and the IDF for going into Gaza, but they're punishing innocent civilians in the United States. And they're doing it to get attention. And so that makes them terrorists. And they ought to be treated as such. So they're finally starting to arrest some of these people, but that is not going to solve the problem. The final thing I want to point out here with this live is that this rot is so deep in US universities that you would pretty much have to shut down the university in order to get rid of it, in order to get rid of this left-wing communist rot. And that's what I've been trying to show you throughout the course of this live, is that these organizations are being funded by very powerful entities. Qatar itself has given more than $4 billion to US universities since 2012. And you're talking about, that's just one. I mean, Saudi Arabia gives money, China gives money, Iran gives money, and George Soros gives money, lots of other people. They're giving money, and they're giving it in a way that it's wormed its way into these universities. This is why I've been saying for a long time, I would not send my kid to just any public school. They were bad enough when I went to college. If my kids want to do something that requires college to get, the only way I'm going to pay for it is if it is a very staunchly Christian school that has not been infected by this social justice movement, okay? And it's getting harder and harder to find those. Even Northwestern University, which was a Christian university, actually most of our universities, especially the Ivy League ones, were started as Christian universities and are no longer. But so it's getting harder and harder to find one that is. But just to give you an idea, this comes from a article that just was published by my friend Todd Bensman, who's a senior fellow at the Center for Immigration Studies. And he points out, this is a Daily Mail exclusive, where at Columbia's storied School of Journalism, okay, so if you wanted to be a top tier journalist for the last 50 years, probably, going to Columbia's journalism school was your ticket. George Smith wants to know how old I am. I'm 54 years old. Okay, so going to Columbia School of Journalism, that was your ticket, okay? That's like going to West Point if you want to be an officer in the Army. You can write your ticket after that. And today, right now, as we speak, there's a memorial right in the entryway to Pulitzer Hall, named in honor of Joseph Pulitzer, the founder of the university's journalism school, and the namesake, obviously, of the Pulitzer Prize. The honorees for this memorial, okay, this memorial that's there in the entryway, is purporting to honor journalists, and I should put that in quotes, journalists killed in the Israel-Gaza war, okay? And the honorees that were selected for this list of journalists that were killed so far in the war between Israel and Gaza has almost 100 names on it. Of those 100 names, 21 of them were employed by Hamas's propaganda TV and radio stations. So, did you get that? More than 20% of the names on the list being honored at the Pulitzer Hall at Columbia University's journalism school were employed by Hamas's own propaganda networks. 11 of them, on top of that, work for outlets that are affiliated with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, and at least 3, but probably more, were active terrorists before they were killed. We know that some of them were actually in Israel on October 7th following the Hamas terrorists as they were committing their terror act on October 7th. Now, as we go on further in this article, it says that at least one of those journalists has been accused by Israel of being actively involved in fighting against the IDF. Okay, so these are the people that are being honored by the Columbia School of Journalism at the Pulitzer Hall. Now, again, 21 of these people worked for Al-Aqsa TV. Al-Aqsa TV is part of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, which is Hamas. Al-Aqsa TV was designated as and sanctioned as a terrorist entity, get this, in 2010 by Barack Obama. So even Barack Obama, pro-Iran Barack Obama, recognized Al-Aqsa TV as a terrorist network. Al-Aqsa TV openly celebrated when a terrorist bus bombing happened in Tel Aviv in 2012 that wounded 22 Israelis. And the announcer, who the anchorman who was reporting on this on Al-Aqsa TV, said, quote, "God willing, we will soon see body bags." That's what these are the people being honored by the Columbia School of Journalism. Now, as it turns out, this list was compiled by some of the journalism professors at Columbia. Okay? So if you arrest all of the useful idiots that are out there sleeping in tents in the grass and defacing George Washington's statue, but you don't go after the professors who are teaching these people to hate Israel, well, it's not going to help. Why is this so dangerous? Well, through social media alone, ISIS back in the 2014 was able to recruit over 100,000 foreign fighters to come and join their caliphate in Iraq and Syria between 2014 and 2017. I myself met some of those fighters, and they were influenced by the agents provocateurs, by the organizations that, like Al-Aqsa TV, that are putting out propaganda, and they are, over 100,000 foreign terrorists were created because of this. So that's why they need to take a stand and do something about the journalists and the journalism professors and not just the college kids. Arresting the college kids is not really going to do you much good. Okay? So that's where I want to end it today. If we need to understand, as I said yesterday in yesterday's podcast, this is an information war primarily. This is all about information war. Information war means they're warring for your mind. It's a war for your worldview. They're trying to change the way you think. They're trying to influence and shape what you believe and how you believe it. And they're doing it by putting literally billions of dollars into these dark money organizations that then don't just fund the reporting, the propagandized reporting on the news. They actually create the events that make the news. Okay? This is George Soros's forte. Don't just invest in the stock market and hope it goes down. Invest in the stock market and then make it go down. It's much easier to make the stock market go down than it is to make it go up. It's much easier to organize chaos, to organize some kind of tragedy or scare or something like that, than it is to create something and make profits. And that's what George Soros and his ilk specialize in. We need to see it for what it is. We need to be able to read or hear the news and read between the lines and say, oh, this isn't about a bunch of angry college kids. If it was, who would care? This is about multi-billionaires and governments who are very specifically molding and shaping the opinions of the voters, who then elect their representatives, who then set public policy. Because they can't legally give the money directly, not as much as they would like, to influence public policy. Oh, they are doing that as well. But if we can start to see through that information war, we can start to understand what the truth is of the matter that we're watching. And I don't think you're going to really put a stop to these kinds of protests. We're going to see more and more of these, and especially if Donald Trump gets elected in November. If Donald Trump gets elected, you will see the 4 years after that will be the most violent 4 years in America since the Civil War in the United States. Because these organizations are already setting the framework in place to create absolute mass chaos if Donald Trump were to get elected. Now, I don't think he can get elected. I think they've gotten too good at cheating and at rigging the election. That's just my opinion. But if, by some miracle, Donald Trump manages to get elected in this next election, you mark my words, because I'm not one for making bold predictions, but you mark my words, there will be absolute violence that will make the previous Trump administration look like child's play. Okay? And that's unfortunate, but it's something that we don't need to be afraid. We just need to be prepared. And we can be prepared by honing our ability to read between the lines in what we're seeing in the news, and by preparing our families, both being spiritually fit, physically fit, financially fit. Get yourself and your family prepared, because it's going to be a bumpy ride. Okay, God bless you all. Thank you very much for watching. It's getting on to midnight here, and so I'm going to let you go. So from Yerevan, Armenia, I'm Chuck Holton. Thank you for watching very much, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.